Okay, guys, welcome back to Let's Get Freaky podcast. I am super excited to welcome to the Freaky fam. Tonight, we are joined by John Baranchok. How are you, brother? Thank you very
Good,
much for
good.
being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. Looking forward to it.
You're now a part of the Freaky fam.
All right, all right.
Let's go.
Good deal.
What part of the US are you based in?
Um, I grew up in northeastern United States, but right now and for the past, oh boy, 26 years, I've lived in Rome, Georgia, which is southern United States.
Okay,
And Rome is kind of northwestern Georgia near the Tennessee line.
nice man, nice.
Yeah.
Is that a Bigfoot area, a squatchy area?
Yeah, at about a 2 hour drive from my house, I can access the Ocala National Forest. And that is the biggest uninterrupted expanse of forest east of the Mississippi. Um, so lots of woods there. And that's including it doesn't go up to Maine, but in terms of the amount of concentrated forest, that's including states like Maine and other states further north. We've got a larger continuous expanse of forest down here. So I've also got a wildlife management area called John's Mountain Wildlife Management Area. That's only a 50-minute drive from my house. And I've got a habituation area that's easier for me to access there.
Oh wow. Is that
Yeah.
is that just yours?
Well, it's, I think within the expedition research community, people try and respect each other's areas. These are public lands, so no, it's not just mine. I happen I happen to have one particular campsite in there that I know is a real hot spot because I got growled at by a Bigfoot in there, and so I keep going back to that one.
Hmm.
And but one time uh, I took a fellow psychologist friend, and that spot, it's a 5 campsite group camping area. All those spots were taken, so we found a spot just a little bit down the road, and we may have had a kind of a paranormal Bigfoot encounter a little bit further down the road. So, um, I think that area, the Johns Mountain area, and the state part is called the Pocket. Those are, that mountainous area. That they live there. I'm pretty sure.
Hmm. Interesting. Can I ask you what that paranormal Bigfoot experience was?
Sure. Like I said, we couldn't get my normal spot, and so um, we about not even a quarter mile down the road, on the other side of the road, um, we found a spot, and through a lot of this stretch of mountain, the river runs right beside the road. And the first spot I wanted to get, it was just across the street from all those campgrounds, and a feeder creek ran into it. That's where I got growled at by a Bigfoot. But we couldn't get that one. So we went about quarter mile down the road, and here the stream, rather than running right beside the road or right beside the campground, it kind of curved away from the street and back behind our campground. So you had to walk about 100 yards to get to the stream. At any rate, we scoped out different areas. We didn't have any kind of activity um, when we were in there or driving around. So we set up to go to bed, and I've got a a service dog named Hoss, who goes about 81 pounds last time we weighed him. And I sleep in a little mini trailer, kind of like the teardrop trailers, but not quite, but it's about that size. And the person I took, he's like 6'2", 6'3", big, tall guy, can fit in the trailer just fine. I'm an average height, but fat guy, and I can fit in there fine. And we could have fit the dog in there fine to begin with, but just to kind of, you know, so you didn't have to deal with the dog. I had the dog sleeping outside. So we're falling asleep. He falls asleep, and I'm kind of dozing. And I hear this gurgling sound coming from underneath the trailer. And I listen to it. You know, it can't be water because we're too far away from the stream to hear the water. Um, I couldn't figure it out. I was telling this story to somebody else recently, and they told me a video they watched where an alligator was part in the water and part out of the water, and it used its tail to create infrasound, and you can see the ripples on the water, and the kind of it created a gurgling sound when it did that. It sounded it did sound real similar to that, but again, there was no water around. But at the point that this went on for 45 minutes, it started getting creepy. So I opened my trailer door and brought my dog inside because I didn't know what it was, and I wasn't of the inclination to check it out. So he came in. Interestingly enough, the gurgling stopped, and the dog, the way my trailer's set up, I've got two high density foam couches that fold out into beds beside each other with about a 6 or 8 inch gap in between. And so I put some pillows down there, and the dog kind of sleeps in the gap and on my mattress. Um, so at about 3 o'clock in the morning, this guy, this guy um, starts startling in bed, starts getting agitated in bed, and it woke me up. I was thinking that my dog might have shifted position in the trailer and was stepping on him or something, kind of freaking him out. So I popped up, and he was mumbling, and I don't know what he was saying. And I just kind of put my arm on his arm. And when I put my arm on his arm, he sat upright in, like, a really startled position. And he said that he was experiencing a Bigfoot peering through our window as we were sleeping. Now, we tried to tease out whether this was a dream, whether he could have been dreaming that, or whether it could have been a hypnotic state or something paranormal. He's quite certain it wasn't a dream. So he settled on it either being something paranormal or some kind of hypnotic phenomena.
Mhm.
We couldn't find any prints on the windows of the trailer. Um, Nothing else happened that night, but for him, it was actually quite a scary experience because his experience of it was this Bigfoot kind of with its hands like this on our window,
Wow.
peering in our window.
Was
So
was that window on the side, or was it on the top?
no, it was on the side, and it was on the side. He was windows on both sides
Hmm.
by which we sleep, but yeah, this was peering in on the sides that he was sleeping on.
Whoa.
So he had a pretty good
Yeah.
startle.
Yeah, man. I mean,
Um,
as I was telling you before we started recording, I'm fascinated by Bigfoot, everything Bigfoot,
mhm.
I kind of think that how cool that would be to see something like that, but at the same time, that would be terrifying to see a giant Bigfoot looking through the window.
Yeah,
I could imagine.
yeah,
Did
yeah.
did he say what it looked like what the face looked like? Could he?
Um, no, we didn't. Interestingly enough, we didn't talk much about that. So I don't know the answer to that question. He didn't. We didn't
Mhm.
talk much about that.
How comes that was in the paranormal bracket? Was that because he was in a sleep state?
Well, yeah, I put it. I mean, and that's my classification. I don't know what he would say about it. If he would say it, if it's hypnotic, is it paranormal? I don't know. You can have paranormal experiences as a result of being in a trance that you don't or wouldn't in a waking state.
Hmm.
And so, but you can also hallucinate things under hypnosis that truly aren't there. So I don't know, all I can rely on is his sense of, what happened to him. Because to me, my experience was him kind of jumping up and being startled in the middle of the night. And that's other than the gurgling coming out from under the trailer,
Yeah.
which I still can't explain. Um, that was my experience, but he was the one that kind of experienced the Bigfoot looking in on us.
Hmm. Well, it's strange that you both had those experiences. Like he experienced seeing the face, you heard the sounds.
Yeah.
It's very interesting, man. So nothing else
Yeah.
happened that night.
Yeah. And we didn't have any other activity that trip at all.
Hmm.
Um, One of my top two, I don't know how many stories you want me to tell
I
versus
want, I
talk
want, I
about.
want, I want them all.
Okay.
I want them all, brother.
Okay.
I'd like to go to the start though, how you got into researching Bigfoot and how that
Okay.
started for you.
So I've got my doctorate in counseling psychology and um, worked for a hospital in Rome for 6 years and then started my own practice. And I don't know, year 17 or 18 into my private practice, I realized I was so busy taking care of everybody else that I hadn't been taking care of myself. And so I grew up trout fishing. And I heard the trout fishing kind of sucks in Georgia, but I thought, what the heck? Just wet a line and see if I can get a nibble. So I started went on the internet, and a buddy had once taken me trout fishing in Blue Ridge, Georgia, which is two and a half hour drive north from me. And so I started looking in northern Georgia for fishing maps. And as I was looking for maps, I came across this site that had the whole United States map on it, and in each state, just about every state, it had an orange circle with a number inside of it. So I thought, I don't know, maybe this is the number of streams or whatever. So I clicked on it, and it turned out to be BFRO's, Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization, map of the number of expeditions they were mounting that year in that particular state. So I thought, well, it, it, if I'm going Bigfooting, odds are there's going to be a trout stream somewhere around there in Georgia. So I thought I'd just kill two birds with one stone. And I started going on. Lori Wade is her name. Irrespective of what you think about BFRO, she puts on an excellent expedition. And so for quite a few years, I did my expeditions with her and with Charlie Raymond in BFRO, as well as his Kentucky Research Organization. And then um, Wayne Tothero, Manimal Research are the groups that I have done expeditions with, besides my own and private, get-togethers. And so once I went on my first BFRO expedition, I heard a Bigfoot roar the first night I went out. And then the second night out, they send somebody out to investigate the roar, which was across the valley from where we were. And these guys came back white as a ghost with just an incredible encounter story. And so I was hooked at that
Yeah.
point on the first expedition.
Can you tell us what they saw?
Yeah, this is in my book, Grasping Sasquatch. My book isn't a tell all kinds of encounters book, but um, I do have encounters in there and try and relate it to science for what it's worth. But so the night before, we heard this roar across the valley. There's the river running through the valley, and it came from the other side of the valley. And that the night we heard it, we were out on a point cliff, and about 50 yards to our left was what we called a Bigfoot highway, just this big animal trail straight down the mountain we were on to the river, and then back up the other side of the mountain. And it sounded like it was coming from around there. So the group we're dividing into groups of four, and a guy by the name of John Eves, may he rest in peace. He was one of the first behind the scenes Bigfoot guides on Finding Bigfoot, season 1, episode 1. And Glenn Williams, who was the behind the scenes Bigfoot guide in episode 25 in season 1. They went out with two other rookies that like were friends and family of other folks. And they went down the mountain, and they knew a way to try and access that general area. So they walk down a path through the forest, through a trail through the forest, and come to this big meadow. And on the other side of the meadow was another trail that would lead them down to the river. So they crossed this meadow without incident and started walking down the trail to the river, four of them walking single file. Well, actually, they weren't walking single file. It was Glenn, the two experienced guys, Glenn and John, were walking first, and then the two new guys were walking a few, 5 feet behind them, beside each other. And one of the new guys said, "Hold on a second, guys. I think I got a nosebleed." And Glenn and John in front of them stopped and turned around. And when they turned around, there was a Bigfoot standing like 10 feet behind these two guys. And they were rendered speechless, but managed to point. And in the time that took, it was gone from behind these guys. But the guy wiped his under his nose, and he had a bloody nose. Well, what do you want to do? Well, let's keep moving forward. So they walk couple hundred more yards down, and the same guy said, "Guys, I can't feel or move my right arm." And they no Bigfoot behind him this time when they turned around, but like he couldn't control his arm. But when they lifted his arm up, all his hairs were standing at attention like they would if you put them through a electromagnetic field or something like that. Stand all all on that arm, not the other arm. And he says, I think I'm being zapped. I don't want to go any further. This is enough for me. So the two experienced guys, John and Glenn, they look at each other and said, well, we've been here and done this before. We're going to move forward. You guys stay here and we're going to move forward. So they start moving forward and start getting pelted. Well, start getting things thrown in them that land around them, pebbles and nuts and things of that nature. And like idiots, because they knew better, they started throwing things back in the direction that these things were coming from. And they kept walking. And John Eves, when he told me the story, he said it was like this. He said, well, John, more things started being thrown at us. But all of a sudden, he said, John, have you ever been punched in the stomach to the point where you could feel the person's fist up under your ribs? And I said, yeah, I've been punching. He said, something punched me in the stomach like that. And I doubled over and started projectile vomiting. And so he told Wayne, he said, no, I'm not going any further. Wayne says, been here, done that. I'm going to continue. So Wayne, uh, um, so Wayne, not Wayne, Glenn, I'm sorry. So Glenn starts moving further down the trail, and now he's being hit by things. They're not missing, they're hitting him. And like Glenn and John had a FLIR, and the two other rookies had the high-tech microphones that look kind of like a dish receiver to pick up noise. So he flared down the path. He couldn't see, and flared around the forest. He couldn't see anything. He kept walking and started throwing things back. And Glenn's story to me was, if you can imagine somebody standing in the batter's box at home plate, and you're standing smack dab in front of him, and he takes a swing and hits your sternum with a home run swing, and Glenn just fell backwards from the impact of whatever hit him. But again, didn't see anything, just had that experience. And when that happened, then all hell broke loose. Either a tree break, or either a tree pushover, or a large tree break. He said it sounded like somebody pulled a large tree up out of the ground and swung it against another tree. Some people call them thunder knocks. And started going off with thunder knocks, and just all things started to be thrown at him. He managed to get up and get back to John, but the rocks and pebbles were following them. And so John and Glenn put their backs to each other with their FLIRs, and they start spinning in a circle. and walking as fast as they can back up to the path, and they're still being pelted. And they reach the two rookies. And so now, kind of like a Rambo movie or one of those action war movies, four of them with their backs to each other, with their flares and their microphones out, kind of walking in a circle around, but back up the trail as they're being pelted by stuff. And as they got near the top of the trail, it finally stopped. But when they got to the trailhead that they came onto after they crossed the meadow, there was a boulder. He said it was a boulder the size of a Volkswagen was sitting right in the middle of that trailhead that wasn't there before they went down that trail. So they came back into camp. All four of them just looked white as ghosts when they came back. They were
Wow.
frightened,
Yeah.
frightened.
I can imagine, man.
So,
Wow.
um,
I mean, because there's not too many Bigfoot stories where you hear of people getting hurt through these creatures. I know it does happen.
mm-hmm,
It's quite rare that you hear that, and I
mm-hmm,
guess it's because maybe when these things do attack, it's it's the end. It's game over. You know, you're probably not
mm-hmm.
going to survive. If one of these wants to come for you, there's nothing you're going to be able to do because they're far superior, I would imagine. But it's quite rare to hear people that get hit by these things physically. And I mean,
Yeah,
that sounds nasty, you know, to get hit
yeah,
up in the gut and to be sick. Wow,
yeah.
man.
One of my one of my butt puckering personal encounter stories was a bluff charge, as it turned out, and we can discuss that
Hmm.
anytime you want to.
Yeah, I'd love to hear about that, man. Yeah.
Okay. Any questions before we move on to the?
I mean, I can imagine. So that was your first taste of Bigfoot researching. Is that your first investigation?
Yeah, that was on my first expedition. Yeah,
I mean,
but
what
I
a
was
start.
I to be clear, I wasn't in the group of four.
Hmm.
You know, it was four other people. I didn't experience that
Yeah.
firsthand, but I saw them when they came back, and
Yeah, that must have been wild because you know these guys and you know that they're scared. You know, you can see
it,
that.
well, at this point, I didn't know them because this was my first expedition as well.
Hmm.
But these guys have been, John, 15 years doing this, and probably the same for Glenn. And so they're not prone to flights of fancy.
Yeah.
And you could see the fear in all of them. They all look flushed white like ghosts,
Hmm.
even after a half-hour drive to get back to camp.
Wow. Yeah.
So
And they'd obviously never experienced anything quite that bad.
no, no, no.
Wow, man. But for you, that must have been like, wow, this is, you know.
Pretty incredible. Yeah, pretty incredible.
Hmm.
So I don't know. It was in my second year of going on expeditions with Lori Wade. Um, she covers Georgia and Tennessee. So um, I can't even locate on a map where in Tennessee this place is. But we went again to a wildlife management area, and I think it was a national park kind of combined. And back in the day of the Civil War, the draft wasn't called the draft, the military draft. It was called consignment. And this guy didn't want to go to be drafted, didn't want to be consigned. So he took his family and went way up into the Tennessee hills and built a log cabin up there and lived up there, disappeared up there so he couldn't be found. And so the cabin's still intact. You can rent that cabin at this particular location. I'm sorry, I can't share the name. I know the name and
That's cool.
location, but I can't because of what are those
Yeah,
closed
no problem.
non-disclosure agreements.
Yeah, no problem, man.
But So one night, um, 15 of us hiked up to this cabin, which was about 3/4 of the way up the mountain. And three guys stayed at the cabin with a walkie-talkie. And then a group of four went lower down the mountain and squatched. Another group, two groups were supposed to go higher, one take a left on the forest road, the other take a right on the forest road, and we were supposed to meet together eventually on that forest road because we thought it just went around. But somehow that didn't work out. But I was in a group of four. George Wrigley, 10, 12 years expeditions. Mark Ogleby, the same. And then this was only my second year of expeditions. And there was another guy who was in his first or second year. His name's Dan Kegley. And so from the cabin, we had to hike up this deer trail. And it had rained, torrential rains all night the night before. And this deer trail had a lot of clay in the content of its soil. So it was really hard and slippery going up. We had to grab some handholds and be careful of our footholds. But we got up to the fire road, and the fire road was unkempt. It hadn't been mowed for a long time, so it was full of high grass. And we got up there, and I'm not sure how or why, because I was the most out of shape, fattest of the group. But for some reason, I was in the lead as we're walking up this fire road, and George Wrigley was behind me, and it was it was quiet, unnaturally quiet. You could hear rainwater running off the mountain, and you could hear the trees rustling with the breeze. You couldn't hear any tree frogs, couldn't hear any chipmunks or squirrels scurrying in the leaves or in the underbrush. No deer sign, no pig sign, nothing. No other signs of animal life. So he said, well, usually when it's that kind of quiet, your spidey senses tingle. You get this sense that you're being watched or followed or something like that. So no, I don't think that this is that. Okay. Um, so we walked for a couple hours, hoping that we were gonna run into these other people. We couldn't get radio contact with them to check it out during that time. But finally, after about 2 hours of hiking this fire road, in silence like that the whole time, we finally got good enough reception to get to connect up with the group that we thought we were supposed to connect up with. And somehow we took the wrong turn, and we worked out we were never going to connect with each other. So we said, have you guys seen any animal life or any signs of animal? Oh yeah, we scared turkeys off the road. We scared some turkeys roosting in the trees. We startled a few deer. The road is all torn up from pigs rooting in the ground. So they had all these signs of wildlife, and we had none. So we ended that conversation and figured, well, since we're never going to connect with them, let's start walking back to the deer trail. So we start walking back to the deer trail, and these guys like to get me talking about hypnosis and how hypnosis works and what you can do with hypnosis. and how it may come into play with sightings, Bigfoot sightings, and so on and so forth. So I was talking about the power of suggestion, and we were still probably 300 yards, maybe 400 yards from the deer trail. And I was just talking about hypnosis and suggestibility. And George, I was Georgia was walking in front of me. I was second in line. Um, oh goodness, dysnomia. Um, Mark Ogleby was bringing up the rear, and Dan. Boy, I'm blocking on Dan's name. Dan was third in line. And so George stopped on his heel, pivoted, and covered 3 feet to get in front of me and said, J, got out the first syllable of my name, and this huge tree exploded above our head. It sounded like a bomb going off. It was a tree pushover, but it didn't sound like the tree was pushed over from the root. It was like it had been pushed over a little higher up because you could hear the snapping. And I mean, it was an explosion. And immediately after that explosion, you could hear what sounded like a landslide. It lasted 13 seconds. George had his recorder on. And if you've ever heard a landslide or been around one, you know, it sounded like rocks and logs were rolling down the mountain towards us, but occasionally um, they would hit a big boulder and they'd get airborne and it would be silent. And then you'd hear them hit the ground again. And that sound was going on all around us, 50 feet in front of George, 50 feet in front of Mark. So and you know, this happened in a matter of seconds. And between the explosion and the sound of the landslide, um, um, Jesus, I'm having trouble with names. Um, Mark Ogleby, the last one in line, he scurried a little further back. Myself and George, we tried to scurry forward like cockroaches. But Dan Kegley, bless his heart, he was kind of in the middle of it, and he just pivoted on his heel, looked up the mountain, and went to his hip and started pulling out his K-bar knife to get ready, to get ready at whatever was coming down the mountain. So I have part of why I'm having trouble remembering his name is I have nicknamed him Braveheart for those actions because he held his ground. He wasn't going anywhere. He was ready for battle. Honestly, I was so certain it was a landslide that I was waiting for boulders and big logs to land on the fire road in front of us. It sounded just like a landslide, and that would have fit with all the rain we had, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But not a single twig or pebble ever reached the road, let alone a log or anything else. But as we started to try and figure it out, I shined my red headlight up the mountain, and I saw these small particles drifting down. And then I smelled loam. Do you know what loam smells like?
I'm not
It's
sure.
if you've ever been a gardener and compost, that real rich kind of soil that comes from making loam that has that distinct smell.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I was smelling and seeing. And this huge cloud of loam just settled down on top of us. So we tried to debunk it for 35, 40 minutes. figure out what was going on. We couldn't see any signs of Bigfoot. We couldn't see any signs of a landslide. We didn't know what the heck happened. So we decided, oh, well, let's get back to the cabin. Probably a couple hundred yards to go to the trail, the animal trail down to the cabin. So we start walking that couple hundred yards. Oh, well, when the whole landslide thing happened and settled down, they called up to us. Did you hear that tree explode? It was like, no shit, buddy. It was just about on top of our heads. So so we're walking back towards the deer trail, and the same guy radios up from the cabin again because they got a visual on us, and they said, "Are you walking down the fire road or down the deer trail?" We said, "We're walking down the fire road, 10-4." So we got to the deer trail, started walking, trying not to just fall on our butts and slide down this deer trail. So we're having to pick our way down real slow and careful. And they radio us again. And are you guys on the fire road, or are you on the deer trail? We're on the deer trail now. Why do you keep calling us up and asking this? Well, when you guys were on the fire road, there was either some red orbs or some red eye shine pacing you at about 30 to 50 yards behind you, following you guys. And now that you're on the deer trail, those things are following you down the deer trail. So, of course, we all pivoted and looked up the deer trail, couldn't see a thing, not a thing. So we get the rest of the way down to the deer trail. And to access the deer trail, it was about 25, 30 yards of brush in between the front of the cabin property. And you had to walk around that brush to get on the deer trail. And then the deer trail had brush and trees on either side of it. So we get down the deer trail, get to the cabin. All 15 of us now are gathered at the deer trail or at the cabin. And I hear all of a sudden, look at that, look at that. And I look over and somebody's pointing. And then somebody on the other side of me said, look at that, look at that. What are you guys pointing at? There's some orbs or something out there. And I look, and finally, when I started seeing them, there must have been 20 peepers. You know what a peeper is? 20 infant and juvenile Bigfoots hiding behind trees, and they'd peep out from behind the tree just enough so that you could see their red eye glow, and then pop back to the tree, and then pop their head on the other side of the tree and peep at you. So you could only see one eye at a time.
Mhm.
And it looked like they were moving from tree to tree, so it was hard to know how many exactly to count, but we figured somewhere between 20 and 25.
Wow.
And all of us sat there and watched that on that deer trail for 20 to 25 minutes as well. All of us saw those peepers going on. We never saw, these were all 1.5 to 3 feet in height next to the tree. We
Mhm.
never saw big orbs come out from behind a tree and, you
Mhm.
know, take a look.
Wow.
So yeah, that was pretty exciting. So
And that's a lot of
um,
them as well. I mean, if there's 20
yeah,
juvenile Sasquatch, that's
yeah.
incredible. So you can imagine that the elders, the adults were pretty close by.
Well, so before we walked down, we didn't find anything when we tried to debunk it. So we decided we're going to come back up here in the daylight and get a closer look. So we took two sticks and made an X and put it vertically in the ground. So there's an X sticking up out of the ground to mark where that happened. So we didn't have to second guess it. And, we were all in our 40s and 50s at that point. And the next morning when we woke up, it wasn't happening. We were all stiff and sore from all the hiking uphill we had been doing and then downhill. And so, but there was a guy, we told the story in camp, and there was a guy fresh out of the army who was a big deer hunter, real in good shape. He said, I'm going back up there. So he goes up there and he finds X marking the spot and starts looking around. And I'll be damned if he doesn't find a full Bigfoot print near that X. So he rushes back down that mountain, jumps in his car, drives to base camp, gets somebody who knows how to cast. They drive to the base of that mountain, hike back up that mountain again, and they cast that footprint. And while they're waiting around for the cast to set, they start looking around. And that whole night, we kept looking uphill because that's where it sounded like the landslide was coming from. We never thought to look on the downside of the roadbed. So they go over and approach the downside of the roadbed, and they see a partial print right on the break of the roadbed and a bark tear, 15 fresh bark tear, 15 feet high up the tree. And they're checking this out and looking at it, and they peek out over the drop off, and about 10 foot down that ledge, it plateaued out to a horizontal ledge to the face of the mountain. And it was all muddy. And they said there was 35, 40, 45 juvenile and infant Bigfoot prints down on that little plateau. So as best as we can piece it together, we just actually accidentally stopped either by the nursery or the playground, and mom and or dad, we think, wanted to chase us off. I think in hindsight, I think we were bluff charged.
Mm-hmm.
When he brought that cast back, that was the first, actually that's the first and only actual cast, fresh cast I've seen. All the other castings have been reproductions. When he brought back that cast was 17 and a half inches long, I think 6.5 inches wide, but it was almost like looking at an x-ray, because when you looked at the toes, you could see every joint and bone in all the toes except for the great toe. And in the great toe, it was missing the joint right below the last joint of the toe, the top digit. So you could see the top digit of the toe complete with dermal ridges. Then there was an undistinguishable gap. Then there was another bone and, complete with dermal ridges and everything. And you could see the mid-tarsal break on the pad of the foot, dermal ridges all over the pad. It was amazing. It was really amazing to see.
That is incredible. What a night. And I mean, to come across 20 juvenile Sasquatch, I mean, that would imply that these groups, that these Sasquatch families or groups, whatever you want to call them, that there's quite a large number of them in these groups.
Yes, yes. We with Lori, we've squatched a lot of different state and national parks, and I came to I call her a Bigfoot friend. Janice Carter. Does that name mean
Yeah,
anything to
I've
you?
heard that name. Yeah.
Yeah. So Janice had a book out called Tennessee Chronicles: 50 Years of Living a Peaceful Coexistence with Bigfoot. And she was a young girl, pre-teen and teen interadolescence. Her grandfather found an infant, a relatively newborn baby Sasquatch pinned under a tree when he was riding fences after a big storm. And to make her whole story, not doing it justice, but he brought the infant home thinking it was a retarded child. And they raised it in their home and still until it started eating them out of house and home. And then moved him into the stables in the barn and kept him in the stables until he started killing livestock. And then he was sent off to do his thing. Now, why did I bring up Janice? Janice Carter. So,
So you say that was her family, her dad,
her grandfather.
her grandfather. Okay.
Yeah, it made the book made it, and the book is her book is available on YouTube. And there's one where you got to pay to listen to the reading of the book, and there's another that you don't have to. There's only the book is out of print, but if you want to read an excellent book about Bigfoot
Hmm.
and the anatomy and physiology of Bigfoot, because she hung out with this Bigfoot, and
Wow.
and they named him Fox. And when Fox died, okay, we were talking about families of Bigfoot. That's what got me on this tangent. When Fox died, the clan brought Fat Fox down to her on a stretcher so she could view his body before they took it up to the hills and buried him.
Wow.
And her and one other person are the only two people who know where Fox is buried. But the reason I got on Janice's story is she we another place in Tennessee we look for Bigfoot regularly. She has a pretty close relationship with several clans of Bigfoot in this one state park, to the point that they have them named. One of the families is named the Simpsons, and it's Bart, Homer, Marge, and Lisa.
Are they are they all yellow?
No, no, and
Wow.
uh, and Bart, we had again secondhand story, but on one of Lori's expeditions, Marge was giving birth to another child. Um, Homer was out. Lisa was wet nursing Marge, and Bart was guarding the path to the caves. And an expedition of four went up this trail towards the cave because they kept hearing this wailing and screaming coming from Marge. So they were going up there to check it out. And all of a sudden, they got that sense that something was behind them. Three of them turned. The other guy froze and couldn't move. And I don't know how many yards, 50 yards down the road, Bart, or not Bart, Homer was pacing them on the path, and Homer stood 13 feet and was 7 feet wide.
Man.
And um, needless to say, they got startled. But the guy who froze, he started then experiencing mind speak, calling him closer to the cave. So he kept getting closer to the cave to the point that Bart jumped out in a show of aggression. And these guys were in deep doo doo to the
Hmm.
point that they had to radio down to base camp and have people come to the rescue. And it just so happened that Janice was on that expedition, and Janice was able to kind of settle things down and explain things. So, um, to your point of it's not just one family, this is a little state park in Tennessee, and you'd be surprised if it would hold one clan, let alone multiple clans. But
Mhm.
there are multiple clans living in that park.
Wow. I mean, it might be a difficult question, but roughly how many Sasquatch would you have in one clan? Roughly.
I at this I don't know in one clan per se, because there are familial. I think there are familial ties there. But I was told in this state park again, which is a small state park, that there were 300 Bigfoot living in that state park themselves, including some 20-foot elders, dare I say.
20 foot.
Yeah,
Wow.
according to Janice.
Hmm.
Um, so, no, I don't know what number makes up a clan.
Hmm.
Um, one of Janice's stories, when Fox went off, he came back, I don't know, with a family. It's been a long time since I've listened to the book, but he had a family maybe of 6 or 7 with, or five, somewhere between 5 and 7 offspring, and his wife. And he eventually brought them back to the farm. And one of the kids' names was Blackie. They named him Blackie because he was jet black. And one night, one late afternoon, a girl was walking home from school and decided to cut across a meadow, a shortcut. And Blackie sexually raped this young girl, and was expelled from the clan as a result of that. Was ostracized from the clan and never allowed back in the family after that. And this happened, we're talking 30, 40 years ago. And this woman, Janice tells me, this woman was just released from that sanitarium, just like within the past 7 years, she was released. Um, so,
Man.
uh,
So was Janice having like, contact with these creatures and she could actually communicate with them?
she communicates telepathically with them.
Hmm.
And yeah, yeah.
So she can get up close to them and
I don't, we've never discussed how close she can get. Um, she was going to arrange a meet and greet between them and myself and a small group of people, but unfortunately, that never came to pass. So, on another expedition, Igor Burtsov is a Bigfoot investigator out of Russia, and she showed me pictures of Igor Burtsov's research assistant taking a selfie with the Bigfoot.
whoa. Wow. You saw
Just
that?
like, yes, just like, and the Bigfoot had its head tilted in to smile at the camera, and they were both touching heads. Um,
What?
and I also saw pictures of this same Bigfoot forcing itself into a little compact pickup truck. And the story was told to me that you just about ran into the trees, but figured out the brakes just before he wrecked the truck into a tree line.
Man.
Um,
Are they
so
are these pictures out there? Are they in online? Have they been put anywhere?
I think she's posted them once online, but I can't say that for sure because there are some other incredible pictures of the same Bigfoot. It's only one Bigfoot, but kind of you know what Carillion photography is? Taking a
I'm not
picture of
sure.
people's auras.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
There's a picture of this same Bigfoot that looks like it's a picture of him with these electric auras coming off of him. And another picture of him, I forget what he was doing in this picture, but this Bigfoot had blonde dreadlocks. And I said, Janice, that seems pretty incredible for a Bigfoot to have blonde dreadlocks. She said, well, this guy's particularly vain, and he likes his blonde hair. So he digs up, and she gave me the name of the root. There's this root that they can dig up and smash up on a rock and add a little water, and it has like a bleaching effect. And he puts that on his hair for
Wow,
to bleach his hair.
man. I mean, these creatures are sounding very like this is sounding like they're very human.
Well, and then you know, of course, you hear the stories of aggressive Bigfoots.
Hmm.
My last encounter, after 6 years consecutive, over 300 hours of boots on the ground looking, not counting hours getting to the camp, setting up camp, but just getting out at night and looking. I've got over 300 hours of time, boots on the ground in the woods looking for Bigfoot. And I've yet to have my first class A where you can clearly identify it as Bigfoot. But what was my point? What did you just say? What did you?
What was you
I'm
gonna?
sorry.
That's okay, man. Was you gonna say your latest
Oh
encounter?
yeah. So um, Lori was nice enough to ask me after a year and a half, year and 3/4 of recovery from my medical condition. Lori was nice enough to ask me and do a presentation on my book at one of her outings at this same location where Marge and Homer live. And so a Bigfooting buddy lives only a 30-minute drive. His house is only a 30-minute drive from that. So he came over and we went out during the day, just him and I. And I don't know why. I've never heard somebody offer any theories, but for some reason, we spend a lot of time looking for Bigfoot around graveyards. It seems like Bigfoots hang out at graveyards. Um, any expedition I've been on where there's a graveyard, we're there at night checking it out. And um, so Craig Roach is the name of my research and buddy. So we pull into this graveyard, and it's a small one, but it's an old one out in the woods. And I look at my phone because I want to take some pictures of it. And I had a 75% charge on my phone. I took 5 pictures of it. And when I stepped out of bounds of that graveyard, I looked again and my phone was completely drained. I've never, in the 6 years prior of doing this, never had that electric drain that you hear other people talk about,
Hmm.
when you're around Bigfoot or trying to get a look at a Bigfoot. And so we didn't think much of it. Drove a mile and a half down the road to this trailhead where they had just cut out a new cul-de-sac, and it had some big trees piled up on one side of the cul-de-sac and a big pile of tree logs on the other. And behind those tree logs was a little mound of forest, little strip of forest with some trees on it that sloped back down to the road. And then the trailhead was kind of in the middle of the cul-de-sac. And so we pull in, and I'm moving slow because my mobility isn't what it used to be. But I open the door and I hear uh, 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 uh. 7 rapid fire grunts like that. Craig had gotten out a lot quicker. He said he counted a total of 14 of them. I I didn't know what to make of it. It almost sounded like a deer rutting, but it wasn't rutting season. And I'm pretty sure it wasn't a bear. But it was eerie enough that neither of us, and I had my service dog Hoss with me, none of us were overly eager to go go on the other side of those logs and check it out. So, and we were there to hike this trail anyways. He wanted to show me his trail. Well, we only got about a quarter mile down the trail and I couldn't get any further because of weakness in my legs. But on the way down, we saw my dog sniffed out some poop. I don't know if it was, I don't think it was Bigfoot poop. It was probably bear poop. Didn't look big enough to be Bigfoot poop. But it was neat having the dog around because we walked right by that. We wouldn't have even seen that, but for having the dog with us. So, but I needed a break after about a quarter mile. So I pulled out a little miniature chair out of my backpack for when I go on night ops and said to Craig, why don't you take Hoss further down the trail and let him sniff other things, and I'll just hang out and here and wait to see if you guys find anything. So he takes off, and I'm sitting there probably about 3 or 4 minutes by myself. They're out of visual range and hearing range at this point. And I hear this bird whistle, but it was too perfect of a bird whistle. It was so perfect, it sounded unnatural. And it was just a single whistle. It wasn't like there were a bunch of birds in the trees chirping and playing around. Just a single crystal clear bird whistle. So perfect and so clear, something sounded wrong with it. And when I localized where it was coming from, it was coming from that same mound where the grunting was coming from. So I thought, I need to check this out. So to make a beeline to it, I would have had to break trail through the brush to get there. And I'm at risk for falling, so I didn't think that was a good idea. Or I had to walk back up the trail we just came without my dog to help me get up the inclines and then go over to the mound and check it out. And I didn't want to do that. So I just said, oh well, screw it. Hell with it. So Hoss and Craig get back. Um, we make it back to the car. No other experiences. But a week later, I'm watching a documentary on Alaska Bigfoot. And in this documentary, they say, yeah, you know, the Bigfoots are a lot more aggressive up here in Alaska, and people have to shoot them and report that they've been attacked with them. But what they like to do up here is they like to use a bird whistle to lure people to lure people in close to them and then attack them. And I thought, oh shit,
Whoa.
I'm so glad that
Yeah.
I didn't go and check that out by myself. So I don't, I don't know. Um,
Wow.
I didn't see any, just it was that grunting. My experience was that grunting and the bird whistle.
Hmm.
But I was glad I didn't check out the bird
Yeah, man.
whistle.
It sounds like it's trying to lure you in. Whoa,
So,
man. Can I ask you, going back to the picture that you saw with the selfie,
mhm.
can you just sort of describe what the face, because it fascinates me. There's so many different depictions of what the Bigfoot face looks like.
This
Would you
guy, this guy kind of had a Harry and the Hendersons kind of facial
interesting what the
construction.
conical shaped head?
Uh-huh. Yeah. I saw, I've seen one of the best close-ups of a Bigfoot I've ever seen was captured by a physician out of Chattanooga on a trail cam. And what had happened was this Bigfoot just walked right up to the trail cam and ripped the trail cam off the tree. But in doing so, you got a head and neck shot of the Bigfoot. And honest to God, this thing looked like something out of Predator. Predator.
Hmm.
It had dreadlocks, and its head, you know, is it Predator, the movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger and the
Yes, that's it.
military guys
Yeah.
go into the jungle?
Hmm.
This and it was night vision. So it wasn't, it wasn't looking like at looking like looking at a regular black and white photograph in daylight. It was green. It was greenish gray. So, but it looked the face and head looked like the character from Predator that way.
Whoa, man. So the
So
the other one that you saw in with the selfie, is it more like a human face or like an ape or a mixture of the two? Because that's the big question. Are these things close to apes or are they close to humans? What would you say?
it, I think I keep going back to the movie Harry and the Hendersons, and has a lot of looking features in him, but maybe some human qualities in his face.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, yeah, I've never seen one that close to get those details.
Yeah. Not yet.
Not yet. I hope to.
Yeah, man.
Um, again, Janice's father, grandfather, thought he had a retarded baby that was abandoned. Are you familiar with the Smaja stake story? Justin Smaja?
I'm not sure. I don't think so.
Justin Smaja shot, um, he was poaching for bear, and he ended up shooting an infant Bigfoot dead and wounding one of the parents. But the adults got away. But when he went up to the carcass of the infant and picked it up and held it in his hands, he said he could see the humanity in it so much that he buried it. He didn't. He felt like he killed a human,
Hmm.
and he buried it under in a shallow grave with some brush on top of it. So, I think there are different subspecies of them, and I think maybe some subspecies are more aggressive than others, and I think some subspecies are more friendly than others.
Hmm. Hmm.
is my own
Interesting.
thought. Kind of like, you got good humans and bad humans.
For sure. Yeah. Because I mean, these creatures that they're described, they're all very similar around the world. They're all described the same roughly, but there does seem to be differences in some of them. And you
Hmm.
just wonder, maybe are they the same thing? You know?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
also you've got like Dogman and things like that as well. Do sometimes they get mixed up in that bracket as well? Maybe these things are, you know, I don't know. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but maybe some of the Bigfoot types, maybe they're different creatures completely.
Hmm. I think Dogman's a different creature from Bigfoot.
Hmm.
Um, I'm trying to think. I'm blocking on. There's an artist out there who does renderings based on people's encounters.
Hmm.
She has people. God, I'm having a hard time with names tonight.
I always
Um,
do. I told you before, I'm terrible with names.
um, she has people who have had Class A encounters and a lot of up close Class A encounters. Describe them to her, and then she does an artist rendering of them. And if you ever, I wish I could remember her site. If you ever go on her site or see any of her art, it's actually pretty interesting, the spectrum of the appearances of faces,
Hmm.
ranging from a human-like face almost on one end of the continuum to a more ape-like face on the other end of the continuum.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah. Some
so
literally have like human noses, human eyes, and then some look like gorillas. Like
uh,
there's such, and you just wonder, are they the same thing? You know, like you
yeah.
said, the ones that you saw with the dreadlocks, that's a
Hmm.
very human. That's a very human aspect. Like, are they like just a different type of human, basically?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's very
Yeah.
interesting, man.
It's also strange have it seems strange having that kind of relationship with them.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
Come on, let's do a selfie.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And why do you think some people can have that relationship?
I don't know. I don't know.
Because often those people as well won't put the the information out there as well. Would you agree? Like
Yeah.
these pictures don't get put out.
Yeah.
And I've heard that
I'm
so many times where people have got like incredible pictures that they don't want to put out because of ridicule and stuff like that. So
yeah.
they don't put them out.
Yeah. I'm told that it depends on your heart whether whether they will reveal themselves to you or not. Um, yeah, I don't know.
Hmm.
Um, I I'm yet to have that class A, but I'm working on it.
Yeah.
Um, I've been invited to a Facebook friend's home where these things go into his barn with regularity,
Wow.
and so I'm hoping to get up close and personal there.
Interesting. I am hearing a lot of stories at the moment. I don't know what it is. A lot of people have reached out and told me about stories of families having connections with families of Sasquatch. You know,
Hmm.
to people that don't really look into this stuff, that don't really believe in Bigfoot and stuff like that, they're going to think it's crazy. But there's so many stories out there of families that have got these connections. Like it's quite
Hmm.
there's a lot of stories out there. You know, it's very interesting, and I'm hearing it quite a lot at the moment.
Yeah, being a psychologist, I feel like I've got a multiple personality disorder at times because, we, um, what I'm trying to push in my research is using experimental science in the field that allows you to then crunch some numbers and allow a statistical analysis to answer your questions. But I cut my teeth on the experiential and observational science where you go out and you try and capture a picture of one or a footprint or a cast or hear a vocalization or whatever, and so some of these stories, honestly, are so incredible, it makes you question whether they're true or not. Um, but it's hard to judge because we really don't know. We don't know squat about
Mhm.
Sasquatch.
Yeah, yeah.
I read a story on Facebook where a woman claimed to have a Bigfoot baby daycare, and the Bigfoot parents dropped off their infants at this lady's house during the day and would come back and pick them up. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know.
It's difficult. It's difficult
Yeah.
because without the pictures, without the proof, people can say these things and it's hard, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you don't want to disrespect anybody, you know. We just want answers. We just want to know what's going. There's clearly a lot to the Bigfoot. Whatever's going on, we don't know, but we just want the answers.
Yeah. We don't know. And honestly, for other rare or unknown species, a photograph suffices.
Hmm.
Um, you know, somebody, Doug Hychek, who besides being a Bigfooter is a Renaissance man. He put together. He was the first one to design a camera system to capture live video of the giant squid in the ocean.
Hmm.
You know, and so other rare and unusual species, a photograph has been sufficient. But I think the bar, unfortunately, has been set higher for Bigfoot just because of, I don't know why. All the debate over the Patterson Gimlin's film's validity. So I think we've got a serious Bigfoot researcher has a higher mountain to climb for proof
Hmm.
than other researchers who research rare species.
Hmm. Yeah,
So
yeah, and it's going to get harder with AI and the technology that we've got going forward. You're going to get the perfect video with a Sasquatch holding up that day's newspaper, and
yeah,
people still won't believe it. You know, it's getting to that point now where you go online and it's hard to believe anything. You know, but
yeah, and I not to plug myself too much, but I think that's why it's important that we shift away from strictly observational research and start doing more experimental research, because observational research and pictures and recordings, a little less recordings, but it comes down to debate and opinion so often.
hmm.
And if you're going to be a science, you need to speak the language of science, and the language of science is math. And you need to figure out a way to be more objective, and that's through statistical analysis. So I'm trying to sway people to learn how to do that stuff, but we're pretty entrenched in going out in the woods. And
Hmm. That's addictive.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
when you're getting them experiences, it's amazing. Can I
yeah.
ask you a difficult question? But what do you think a Bigfoot is? And I know that's tough because we don't know, but I'd just like to know what people think they are.
That's the easiest question you ask me. Insufficient data is my answer. um, I think about this often, and it's interesting that we have a dichotomy in kind of a dichotomy in the community between flesh and blood and then the woo group. And I was thinking just the other day, why, we've got this dichotomy where it's either or. Why does it have to be either or? We've got humans who have true telepathic and psychic powers. So why couldn't there be a flesh and blood Bigfoot that has those same powers.
Hmm.
And so, but it seems like most researchers, if you're in the flesh and blood camp, there's no room for the paranormal or the woo or the interdimensional in your worldview. It's just flesh and blood. It's just a flesh and blood creature. And I'm just not sure it's safe to have that dichotomous type of thinking with these things, given given how little we know about them, and given consistent reports of zapping and mind speak and other kind of um, I don't know if you would call them paranormal or whatever you, I don't want to offend any of the people in the paranormal community, whatever label would be appropriate.
Hmm.
It's not just one or two sightings of those types of phenomena. There are a lot of those as well. And if we're counting the flesh and blood, we sure should be counting the woo. I think about back when you got a cold or a disease and you went to the barber for a bloodletting, because that was the common cure for most people's um, problems because of their humors. Just a little bloodletting at the barber will do. And then somebody invented the microscope, and for a long time the notion that things that we couldn't see can impact us and affect our health was scoffed at, and was thought unbelievable even by scientists of the time. And I think that's kind of what we're doing with Bigfoot. It doesn't fit our worldview. There's no way a little germ that I can't see could make me sick. There's no way that a creature I've never seen can do those things. But where would science be, medical science especially, if if we just dismissed the findings of the microscope,
Hmm.
and we'd still be going to barbers for bloodlettings. So
Yeah.
I think to be a complete Bigfoot scientist, I think you got to be open to both sides of that coin. And I think we need more cross pollination between the researchers.
Hmm. Yeah. Interesting, man. Yeah, there could be a science behind these Sasquatch that we just don't understand yet.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Interesting. Interesting, man. You've blown my mind tonight, brother. Some of the stuff you
Oh,
told me.
really?
Super interesting. I've got to ask you though before we wrap it up. You mentioned you saw a UFO, and I've got to ask
Yeah,
you what happened and what you saw.
sure. So I must have been 12 or 13 years old in Pennsylvania. Grew up in a rural part of the country in Pennsylvania. 3 acres of land, most of it grass, lawn. And so we had a riding tractor and a push mower to keep our lawn trimmed. And it was one of the first grass cuttings of the year. And so then we would rake grass. So I was up, our land was on a two-tier level. The house sat street level, and then there was a terrace down to a lower level. And I was on the upper level, the street level, behind our house, raking grass. My parents were down in the lower level, weeding the garden. Our neighbor, Dale Wenner, he had this old farmhouse across the street, but his old barn was on the same side as our house. And his barn bridge, I think a barn bridge is like a pile of dirt that allows people to drive their tractor up into the upper level of the barn. So his barn bridge and his property line on our side of the street abutted our property. So we shared a property line. So when I was cutting grass and he had high grass on his barn bridge and that part of his property, I would cut that little bit of his grass, and vice versa, just being nice neighbors. So Dale had done some grass cutting that day, and he was on our side of the road, um, down below his barn, raking grass as well. And I don't know why. To this day, I can't fathom why, or maybe it just seems like this in my mind. But we lived we lived on a three-quarters of the way up a mountain, big mountain, but we lived kind of in a little dip at the base of a hill in a little valley in the middle of the mountain. And then the road went up a steeper hill and made a turn. And there was a rod and gun club adjoining our property. So we lived rural. And there were a few other houses on this road. When we were kids, we would ski and sled down this road right past the barn. So, but all of a sudden, all of us, my mom, my dad, myself, and Dale, we looked up over the roof of the barn. And at the top of that hill, there was some houses, and then the houses, the hill, you couldn't see the ground of the hill because there were houses there. From behind those houses came this big meteorite smoking and burning, and it popped up over the hill, over that house, those houses, and we all must have seen it simultaneously because we all turned our heads at the same time. I don't remember it making any noise, to be honest with you. Um, but it came up behind a house. It dropped back down that hill so low that it disappeared behind his barn, and I lost sight of it. And then it changed trajectory again and came up right over the roof of his barn, dipped down over his barn again, and I'm standing there with my jaw dropped, and then I realized, shit, I got to move. I'm sorry to use that word.
That's okay.
I've got to move, or this thing's going to hit me. So we lived in a ranch house with the main house, a garage, and then something called a breezeway in between, just a little roof, but no walls or anything. So I jumped into that breezeway for fear of getting hit by this thing, and I can see it like it was yesterday. This thing came down when it passed that breezeway. It wasn't 2 or 3 feet off the ground, and I could see it was a black surface, but I could see crystals on fire and flames coming off this thing, and of course, then smoke trailing it. I had the impulse to reach my hand out, but I didn't do it because for fear of getting burned. It passed that close to me. And I thought, I'll be damned, this thing is gonna land and crash in our yard. Or if not our yard, at least the property line between our house and the rod and gun club behind us was had hardwoods, a big long line of hardwoods. And if it doesn't crash in our house, most certainly it's going to take out those hardwoods. So when it passed, I immediately stepped out of the breezeway, and I could see the black smoke trailing, and I'll be damned if it didn't gradually elevate and go over the tops of our trees, and then just continued flying and smoking till it was out of sight in the distance.
Wow.
And for days, months, really, we we looked in the paper for a meteorite crash or a UFO crash or anything. Never saw anything in the paper about it. But I know for sure one thing: meteorites don't change course
No.
4 or 5 times when they're coming down. And this thing changed course.
Wow. How big would you say it was? Like,
It was about the size, I would say, of a Volkswagen bus.
mhm. Oh, wow.
And it looked, overall, it looked like a piece of coal, but you could see ice. I could see ice crystals on it. And what was so bizarre and why that sticks to me with me is I was seeing ice crystals with flame coming off of them, which was really bizarre to me.
Wow. At that time, was you thinking UFO or was it you just so confused and not sure what you were seeing?
Yeah, I think we thought meteorite, and it really wasn't until I got a little bit older and started thinking about, well, meteorites don't change course, that I realized it couldn't have been a meteorite. It had to be some kind of UFO.
Wow, man.
So
That's incredible.
that's my
What
UFO story.
have you seen any pictures online or anywhere that are similar to what you saw?
No, no,
Interesting.
I haven't. And I'm, as I understand it, by the time most meteorites are pretty small by the time they hit Earth, they break up in the atmosphere. And
Mhm.
this was a big chunk of rock. This is a big chunk of rock.
Wow, man.
So,
Yeah. And when that took place, was UFOs a big talking point? Like, I mean, today ufology is huge and it's on mainstream media and everywhere. I guess it wasn't then.
no, I mean, when UFOs or Bigfoot came up in our house, it was a point of laughter. It was a joke. We didn't, I wasn't raised to believe any of those things. In fact, I was raised to disbelieve those things.
Hmm.
So,
Man, well, when you get that close to a UFO, it's hard to disbelieve that.
yeah, yeah.
John, I have to say you have blown my mind tonight, brother. I have
Oh,
thoroughly enjoyed talking to you.
well,
Uh,
I've enjoyed it as well. Thank you.
very interesting. And hopefully this is the first of many conversations. I'd love to talk to you more, talk to you again.
Sure.
Can you tell the listeners where they can find you?
I don't have, I don't have like a Bigfoot group. You can see how my name's spelled. Just my personal web page, under John Baranchok on Facebook, is where I put out my propaganda. And my book, Grasping Sasquatch, Prepping for Scientific Field Work, can be had on Amazon, or if you go to either Untold Radio, they will have a link to their publication company, which is known as Hanger One Publications. And so you can get to the book that way as well.
Awesome. Awesome,
It's
man.
unlike any Bigfoot. So let me say this: if you're going to that book because you want to read about um, Bigfoot stories, they're in there, but that's not the focus of the book. This is kind of like a psychology textbook, introductory to psychology textbook with Bigfoot as the main star.
Hmm. Interesting.
So it's not novel like, it's more textbook like.
Hmm.
Just a heads up.
Awesome, man. Well, I'm going to be getting it, that's for sure.
Oh, well,
And
thanks.
I'm going to put the links in the show description so people can go and get it right now as well.
Okay.
Yeah, man. Very interesting stuff. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'd love to come back anytime you'd like.
Yeah, let's do it, man. Let's do it.
Okay.
Guys, thank you so much for listening. We hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you have, make sure you share it where you can. That is a great way to support the show. We're going to be back very soon for more freaky conversations. In the meantime, stay safe and keep it freaky. Bye for now. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Bye bye.